Welcome to the deep dive. You've shared some really compelling material with us, these reports focusing on the death of Pope Francis, April 21st, 2025. Easter Monday, as you pointed out.
Right, and that timing, Easter Monday, immediately jumps out, doesn't it?
It really does. So our aim here isn't just to recap the news. We want to dive into what these sources, specifically the spiritual website's reportage, tell us about the event itself, its significance.
Looking beyond the headlines,
Yep.
really. Understanding the context, the immediate aftermath, and maybe some of the deeper meanings suggested.
Exactly. Our mission, if you will, is to piece together the key facts from these sources, how things unfolded right after, and explore those interpretations, especially around that Easter Monday timing.
Which, as we said, feels incredibly symbolic right from the start. It frames the whole event in a particular light, doesn't it? A light of, perhaps, completion tied to the resurrection.
Absolutely. So let's start with the official details. The announcement itself, according to these reports, was made at 9:45 a.m. Vatican time, that Monday, April 21st.
Although the actual time of death was earlier.
Yes, 7:35 a.m. at his residence, the Casa Santa Marta. He was 88.
And it was Cardinal Kevin Farrell, the Camerlengo, who made that announcement.
Right. And the words used in that announcement, as reported here, really seem to capture the essence of Francis's papacy. Themes of service, the gospel.
Care for the poor, the vulnerable. Yeah, it reads almost like a final summary of his ministry's focus.
It does. Did the sources elaborate on how Cardinal Farrell framed it?
They did.
Hmm.
He apparently spoke of it as a return to the Father's house, really emphasizing the spiritual journey, not just an ending. It set a very specific theological tone right away.
Grounding it in faith. Okay, so to understand that moment, we need to look at his health leading up to it. The sources say he was admitted to Gemelli Polyclinic back on February 14th, 2025.
Valentine's Day, ironically, initially for bronchitis.
But it escalated quickly. By February 18th, the diagnosis was bilateral pneumonia, both lungs affected.
Which is serious for anyone, especially, at 88 and with his prior health history.
Exactly. The sources really stress that point pneumonia in the elderly, particularly with a history like his, is a major concern.
He had that lung surgery years ago, didn't he?
We'll get to that. But first, this final illness involved a long hospital stay, 38 days.
Well, over 5 weeks.
Yeah. He returned to the Vatican on March 23rd. And there was this hope, that being back in his own space might help his recovery.
A very understandable hope. Comfort, familiarity. But as you hinted, this wasn't out of the blue. There's a longer history here.
Definitely. We have to rewind quite a bit. Back to 1957 in Argentina. He had a severe lung infection then.
And part of his lung was removed.
That's right, a partial removal. And these sources suggest that it had a lasting impact, reduced lung capacity, recurring respiratory problems throughout his life.
So this final bout of pneumonia wasn't just bad luck. It landed on already compromised ground.
Precisely. Think back even to November 2023, he had to cancel that trip to the UAE.
Oh, I remember that. Flu and lung inflammation, was it?
Yes, so that vulnerability was always there. This final illness was, in a way, the culmination.
Understanding that context is key. It wasn't just pneumonia. It was pneumonia in someone with decades of respiratory challenges. Makes the severity much clearer.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, but related. The funeral preparations. This is fascinating.
What did the sources say about that?
Apparently, the funeral is set to follow a new liturgical book specifically for papal funerals.
Okay.
Get this. Pope Francis himself approved this updated book in April 2024, exactly 1 year before his death.
Wow, that's quite something. Planning his own farewell in a liturgical sense.
It really is. And the emphasis in this new book, according to the reports, simplicity, focusing on the faith in Christ's resurrection.
Less pomp, more pastor.
Exactly. Identifying the Pope as a pastor, a disciple, not some kind of earthly monarch. Archbishop Diego Ravelli, the master of apostolic ceremonies, is quoted saying precisely that.
It's the funeral of a pastor, a follower of Christ, not a ruler.
That's the quote. It reinforces that image he cultivated, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And his direct involvement in shaping those rites, that speaks volumes about how he saw his role. Removing references to regal dignity, immediate placement in the coffin. It all points that way.
Towards simplicity, humility. Okay, let's circle back to that final hospital stay, 38 days starting Feb 14th. Bronchitis to bilateral pneumonia.
Confirmed by the Vatican Medical Council on the 18th as worsening.
And the sources detail some serious complications during that time. He needed blood transfusions.
For low platelets, yeah.
High flow, oxygen therapy, obviously for the breathing difficulties. And there were early signs of kidney issues, too.
Mild kidney insufficiency, noted around February 23rd. So it was clearly a multi-system struggle, not just the lungs.
A very tough battle. But the sources also highlight his, well, spiritual strength during this.
How so?
There was this huge wave of prayer from Italy and around the world, and he actually sent an audio message on March 6th.
Oh, really? What did he say?
Expressing gratitude, but also saying, "From here, I am with you." Still connecting pastorally.
Even from his hospital bed. That's quite powerful.
And then that public appearance, March 23rd, on the Gemelli Clinic balcony.
Right, just before he returned to the Vatican. That must have been a significant moment for people. A sign of resilience.
Definitely. And the sources mention something else soon after getting back to the Vatican. He made an impromptu visit to his favorite basilica in Rome.
To pray before the Virgin Mary, that feels very in character. Seeking spiritual solace immediately.
It does. And back at the Vatican, the care was intensive. Continuous oxygen, 247 medical supervision.
Antifungal meds, too, it says here, for a secondary lung infection.
Yes. Plus respiratory therapy, physiotherapy, every effort was being made.
So the sources frame this final period as what? Both physical healing attempts and spiritual preparation.
Exactly. A time of tending to the body, but also preparing the soul. It's a comforting way to look at it, I suppose.
It acknowledges the reality of decline, but also the spiritual dimension. Makes sense.
Now, we touched on the long-term health issues, but the sources really hammer home how persistent these were throughout his papacy. That 57 surgery cast a long shadow.
Right, leading to those canceled events, the recurring bronchitis and inflammation we mentioned.
And his mobility issues became increasingly obvious, didn't they? The wheelchair, the cane.
Limiting his speaking time, too, sometimes.
Yes. But interestingly, the sources suggest this didn't necessarily diminish his impact. In fact, it might have enhanced it for some.
How so? Like leadership through vulnerability.
Kind of. Embodying pastoral leadership through suffering, showing solidarity with those who struggle physically. It humanized him.
That's a powerful perspective. That leadership isn't about being immune to weakness, but about carrying on despite it.
And the timeline lists those specific major health events in his later papacy. July 2021, the colon surgery for diverticular stenosis.
Then June 2023, the surgery for that incisional hernia.
His absence from the Good Friday Via Crucis in 2024, that was notable. And the chronic sciatica, always affecting his movement.
It's quite a list. It underscores the physical toll of those final years. Remarkable that he kept going.
Which brings us to the question of resignation. The sources mention this.
He did talk about it publicly, didn't he? Referencing Benedict XVI.
Yes, back in 2022. He said he'd consider it if his health really prevented him from fulfilling his duties conscientiously.
But he didn't in the end. He stayed in service until his death.
Right. And that decision itself seems significant. Prioritizing the mission, perhaps?
It suggests a deep sense of duty, I think. Balancing the reality of his health with his commitment to the church. A model of servant leadership, maybe? Choosing to serve until the very end, despite the personal cost.
Moving now to his legacy. The term the people's pope comes up a lot in these sources.
A very common description for him, focusing on his pastoral compassion.
His theological vision, they say, was rooted in mercy and justice. This idea of the church being open, inclusive, especially for those on the margins.
The poor, refugees, the excluded, that was a constant theme, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And his global influence pushing for dialogue, reconciliation, speaking out against social injustice. The sources paint a picture and a deliberate effort to, well, bring the church closer to people needing hope.
That field hospital idea he often talked about, tending to wounds first. It resonated with many who felt alienated or judged.
And his background itself was historic. The first Latin American pope, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, born in Buenos Aires, 1936.
And the first Jesuit pope, too, elected in 2013. That really signaled a shift, reflecting the growing importance of the Global South in Catholicism.
The sources connect his origins to that renewed pastoral openness, focusing on victims of war, hunger, injustice.
Which perhaps grounds that people's pope moniker. It wasn't just a label. It stemmed from his empathy, his commitment to humility, mercy, justice.
And they highlight specific actions like washing and kissing the feet of refugees in that Roman migrant center in 2016.
A very powerful visual symbol of that ethos, directly echoing the Gospels. It communicated more than words could, really.
The sources also discuss his prophetic responses to global crises. He wasn't shy about taking stances.
No, definitely not. Environmental responsibility, for instance.
Right. Laudato Si in 2015, a huge statement on climate change.
In economic injustice, exploitation, migration, he consistently spoke out.
And the role of women in the church. The sources mention he expanded leadership roles for women in pastoral and organizational tasks.
While upholding the traditional teaching on priesthood, yes, it was a balancing act there too.
Which leads into this idea of dialogue intention that the sources explore, navigating contemporary issues alongside church teaching.
Like his tone towards LGBTQ individuals.
Exactly. That famous 2013 remark, if someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge? That signaled a shift in tone, certainly.
But, as the sources also note, he reaffirmed core moral teachings later on. They mention the 2024 document, Dignitas Infinita.
Right, addressing gender identity, surrogacy, abortion, euthanasia from a traditional perspective.
So it's presented as a kind of pastoral tightrope walk. Mercy towards individuals, upholding doctrine. Some see it as classic Jesuit pastoral wisdom.
Meeting people where they are, but still pointing towards the teaching.
Something like that, yeah. A complex approach that drew both praise and criticism.
And underlying all this, the sources stress his fundamental theology of human dignity.
Every person bearing the image of God. That was central.
Fueling his advocacy for the unborn, the elderly, the poor, the rejected, everyone.
And it connects back to that field hospital metaphor again. Healing comes first. Dignity is inherent. That really shaped how many people approached ministry under his papacy.
Bringing us back to the end, his death coming right after Easter. The sources see deep spiritual significance in this.
A culmination of his life and service, linking his passing with the hope of resurrection.
Precisely, the timing itself becoming part of the message.
Happening within the Easter season, the core celebration of Christian hope over death definitely adds a layer of meaning for believers. It frames death not as an end, but a transition in light of that hope.
And just before he died, that final public appearance, Easter Sunday, April 20th.
From the balcony, in his wheelchair.
Yes, a brief blessing. Just, dear brothers and sisters, happy Easter. Cardinal Camastri celebrated the main mass because Francis wasn't well enough.
But his presence itself,
Yeah.
even frail, it was a powerful witness, wasn't it? Commitment to the very end.
It seems so. A final act of pastoral connection on the most important day.
Then the next morning, Monday, April 21st, 7:35 a.m., Easter Monday.
And the sources note this was the second day of the Easter octave, that 8-day celebration of the resurrection.
So, right in the heart of that celebration.
Yeah, and the interpretation offered is that the timing itself acts like a final homily.
Embodying the Easter journey, suffering, death, leading to resurrection hope.
As if his death itself proclaimed that core belief. Life conquers death.
That's a profound reading of it, connecting his personal end so directly with the central mystery of the faith he led.
After Cardinal Farrell's announcement, the reaction was immense, according to the sources. Global mourning.
Church bells ringing in Rome, crowds gathering in St. Peter's Square.
Condolences pouring in from everywhere, religious leaders, heads of state, public figures.
It underscores his reach, doesn't it? He was seen as a global moral figure, far beyond just the Catholic Church.
A voice for humanity, love, spiritual leadership, as some put it.
That widespread respect speaks volumes about the impact he had.
And the sources circle back to that legacy of humility and service, his choice to live in Casa Santa Marta.
Not the apostolic palace, his simple clothes, that famous line about shepherds needing the smell of his sheep.
All reinforcing that image of evangelical service. His death, they suggest, marks the end of an era focused on compassion, humility, inclusion.
And during the Sede Vacante, the time before a new pope, the focus will be on his teachings, carrying forward that legacy.
His emphasis on those core values certainly left a deep imprint.
Now, this is where the sources take a more speculative turn. The prophecy of St. Malachy.
Ah, yes, the 12th century vision, the 112 future popes, each with a symbolic description.
And the last one, Petrus Romanus, Peter the Roman.
Who, according to the prophecy, leads the flock through great tribulations, then Rome is destroyed and Judgment Day arrives. Heavy stuff.
It's fascinated people for centuries. Lots of debate, lots of interpretation around those symbolic phrases for each pope. Petrus Romanus carries a lot of weight in that tradition.
And the connection made in these sources is that Pope Francis, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, is widely considered the 112th pope in that sequence.
Making him coincide with that final pope, Petrus Romanus.
Now, obviously his name isn't Peter, but the sources point out his father's name was Pietro.
And he was of Italian descent, linking him to Roman.
Right, so those details, plus the Easter Monday death timing, are being woven into interpretations relating to this prophecy.
It's certainly an intriguing set of connections for those who follow the prophecy. The numerical position, the name link, the timing, it all fuels that interpretation.
But the sources are careful here. They stress the prophecy is symbolic, open to interpretation.
Exactly. It's not necessarily literal prediction for everyone.
Some might see Francis's death as the fulfillment. Others see it more as maybe a call for spiritual awakening within the church or renewal.
The prophecy's main significance, perhaps, lies in keeping focus on the church's mission and the idea of spiritual readiness, regardless of how literally one takes it.
And in the immediate aftermath, the sources say the faithful are turning to prayer, seeking guidance from the Holy Spirit.
As the church prepares for the conclave, the election of a new pope.
Right, and the idea presented is that the prophecy and current events might actually spur deeper spiritual reflection and strengthen the church's mission moving forward.
That period after a pope's death is always one of intense reflection and discernment. The legacy of the past pope always informs the discussion about the future.
Okay, now for perhaps the most unconventional analysis presented in these sources, the horoscope of Pope Francis's death.
An astrological reading, that's unexpected.
Yes, the chart for April 21st, 2025, 7:35 a.m., Vatican City. It's presented here as holding deep spiritual meaning about the future.
Okay, I'm curious. What does this astrological interpretation suggest?
Well, first, the sun in the 12th house, in Taurus. This is read as a return to eternal light, the 12th house signifying completion, divine mercy.
And Taurus representing the quieting of the physical body, the end of the earthly mission.
That's the interpretation given here, yes. A symbolic merging with the divine, grounded in the completion of his earthly life.
Interesting. What else?
The moon in the 9th house, in Aquarius. This is seen as a prophetic farewell, a final testament to faith, solidarity, redemption.
The 9th house relating to church teaching, philosophy, global view, and Aquarius. Humanitarianism, the future.
Exactly. So it's interpreted as signifying the lasting impact of his universal message, his vision for the church and the world.
Okay, it's mapping astrological symbolism onto his known themes.
It seems so. Then there's the ascendant right at the end of Taurus and conjunct Venus.
The ascendant being the outward expression. Taurus, stability, values. Venus is love, harmony.
So the interpretation, a legacy based on love, defined by spiritual service. Carrying the church's burden with care, not ruling with power, echoes that pastor theme again.
Reinforcing that image of compassionate leadership through astrological symbolism.
Then a Pluto midheaven conjunction in Capricorn. This sounds significant.
Pluto is transformation, endings and beginnings. Midheaven is public role, destiny. Capricorn is structure, authority, institutions.
So the reading is radical transformation ahead for the church hierarchy. Structure shaken, but the spiritual mission remains.
That's what a Pluto midheaven conjunction in Capricorn would typically suggest in mundane astrology, a period of potential upheaval and restructuring for established institutions.
And finally, Saturn and Neptune together in the 11th house in Pisces.
Okay, Saturn is structure, responsibility. Neptune is dreams, spirituality, the collective. The 11th house is community, shared goals. Pisces is faith, compassion.
The interpretation offered is a collective spiritual calling triggered by his death. The dream isn't lost, but it needs new form. Requires prophetic maturity, responsibility, hope within the community.
So a call for the faithful to come together, shoulder responsibility, and keep the spiritual vision alive in practical ways.
That seems to be the gist of the astrological reading provided in these sources. It's certainly a different lens.
A very different lens indeed. Fascinating that the source included it.
So, bringing it all together, there's a final summary, a Spiritan summary it's called here. It quickly recaps the main facts.
Date, time, age, Cardinal Farrell's announcement.
His health struggles, the final pneumonia, that last Easter appearance. It restates the symbolism of the Easter Monday death.
And its potential meaning for the church and the world.
It even includes those quotes, Macron's man of humility, Scouf's man of the people.
And it mentions the simple funeral again, quoting Archbishop Ravelli on focusing on faith in the resurrected Christ.
Right. It concludes by saying his legacy of love, humility, service lives on, and the timing of his death links that earthly farewell with heavenly hope. It ties the factual threads and the interpretive threads together neatly.
It does provide a concise wrap-up of the key points and the overarching themes presented throughout these source materials. It acknowledges the event's factual basis and its perceived deeper significance.
Well, this has certainly been a comprehensive exploration. Thanks again for sharing these sources. They've given us a lot to unpack regarding Pope Francis's passing.
Indeed. From the official accounts to the deeper interpretations.
The key takeaways for me are definitely that powerful Easter Monday timing, the details of his final illness contrasted with his resilience, the consistent focus on his legacy of compassion and humility.
And those more, let's say, esoteric interpretations around prophecy and astrology that the sources included.
Absolutely. So thinking about all these elements, the timing, the humility, the prophecy discussions, the astrological reading, raises a question for reflection, perhaps, for you and for our listeners. What single aspect of Pope Francis's passing, as presented in these sources, and its potential meaning resonates most strongly, and why?
That's a good question to ponder.
Maybe this moment offers a chance to think not just about this one significant life, but about those bigger questions: faith, leadership, the transitions we all face.
A moment for broader reflection, certainly.
We look forward to seeing what sources you share next time and to our next deep dive.